Let me dive a little bit deeper because you already touched upon something that I think is critical. When we look at critical skills of leaders to effectively manage this AI adoption, obviously being humble enough to admit that you don't know, obviously being open to listening, right? That you have to hear other people. Are there any other critical skills that I think, or rather that you think, that leaders are going to need to effectively manage this AI adoption?
Well, we are in the digital age, and every business is being transformed by digital technology in one form or another. The most interesting idea is what Jack just said, which is take this technology and rebuild your entire product. For the vast majority of business executives, that is not practical. They don't have the people inside the company to do it. So what happens then is that they are open to a startup that could enter into the space and compete with them. The obvious one being Tesla, as a good example. How did Tesla show up and redo the entire automobile industry globally? Well, they had a lot of innovation, including a very strong technical founder. But the fact of the matter is they did the work. They built the teams, products failed, all sorts of stuff happened, but they invented a new way of building cars in terms of their design. Using the car analogy, DeepMind figured out a way to build a different kind of brake for electric cars. I don't know if the electric vehicles are all using that brake, but they should. It's more efficient, uses less power, it's regenerative, and so forth. So you have to have a keen understanding of where you are in the innovation chain. So the ideal CEO in the digital age understands the digital technology extremely well, is very familiar with it. They understand it, and they drive the company. They are the chief innovation officer. Because nowadays, the marketing, the distribution, financing is relatively globally available, but innovation remains in short supply. So the CEO should define themselves as the chief innovation officer and figure out what that innovation path is. And don't just tell me it's branding. It's actual invention.
And Eric, as people progress and go down that path, there's a question that keeps coming up and surfacing from people that are not as close to AI as you are. What happens if, or could machines actually and AI eventually take over? And what are, mistakes we could make along the path to lead us in that direction if it is possible?
Everyone in this audience has seen all of the movies, and the movies all look like this. There is a killer robot invented, and then the female scientist battles the killer robot, and she wins. That's the Hollywood plot. Now, we're not building killer robots, so this is an unlikely scenario in the next 5 years. My own view for the next 5 years is that things are going to be relatively peaceful. That the problems that we see today, whether it's pipelining, data generation, hallucinations, what is called groundedness, recency, all of these problems that you can observe as a user, they're all going to get fixed. And I think they're going to be fixed in good engineering ways. I'm not too worried. And as we discussed a little earlier, the open source versus closed source battle will help that because it's competition. That competition will drive it. At some point, you're going to have a perfect assistant that's under your control. That assistant will really help you be successful. And I would argue that that's going to be the end of the great period of AI for the following reason. After that perfect assistant happens, there will be an innovation. The technical term is called recursive self-improvement, where this perfect assistant begins to learn on its own. At that point, I think we're going to have some serious conversations. My joke on this is, do you know what we're going to do when those computers start talking to each other? We're going to unplug them because they're going to talk to each other in languages where we don't understand what they're talking about. Can you imagine having all of these polymaths that are busy talking to each other and you don't know what they're talking about? They could be talking about destroying you. They could be talking about going out to coffee. They could be jealous that you're human and that they're not. We have no idea. how will we get the next generation of leaders after this generation? And the answer is more education globally, more investment in it, more investment in digital, more investment in using these tools in all sorts of ways. I'm old enough to actually think about this question about my grandfather told me that nobody got a PhD when he was young. My father said PhDs were kind of okay, but still rare. And they encouraged me to get my PhD because it was much more available. It was much more common. So in 100 years, you've seen this enormous increase in advanced education, graduate level education. So one of the things to say, and I want to be as blunt as possible, is that the future age of intelligence, as I call it, is going to favor the educated. It's going to favor exactly what Jack said. And I'm open to how you get educated as long as you get educated, right? There are many different ways of doing it. And I worked with Steve Jobs, who was famously a dropout. I worked with others who have also dropped out. Bill Gates, of course, dropped out of Harvard. But all of these people were incredibly smart, and they learned in other mechanisms. So it can be done, but learning is everything is the answer.